practice, but she's good soul. Anyway, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to hear the final report of the hydrology study of the Bloody Brook and Sugarloaf Blacksmith Brook. We're not really sure which name it is. That was commissioned and made possible by the MVP funding. I would like to introduce our committee. We have Lori Basada, Cece Eslinski, Jim Hilchey, Denise Mason, M.A. Sweetland, Pete Law, and myself, Carolyn Ness. And we also have a great support from our staff, Greg Seneker and Alex Galloway. The Deerfield 2030, our climate resiliency plan, is a result of more than 3 decades of work to prepare Deerfield for the challenges of climate change. Climate resilience is the ability of our town, Deerfield, to anticipate, cope, and recover stronger from events like the July 2023 storms. The key is to continuously build capacity to reduce the impacts. It will never be zero, but we can do a lot if we're intentional. As I often say, Deerfield is the bottom of the bowl. Our water table has risen 18 to 20 inches since my first term on the planning board in the 1980s, and we're just wetter. There's nothing you can do about it. We've had, in that same 45 years, we've had more intense rain events. A 500-year and 2 100-year events have occurred when I was on the select board. Our citizens and farmers are threatened, not only by flooding, but by drought and extreme heat. We do not need to be reminded that climate change translates for us more than 5-fold increase in weather-related events that impact our lives. Recent droughts, our cold and snow of the last few days, reflect the lessening of the temperature differential between Arctic cold and the warmth of the tropics. The jet stream slows down and wobbles, especially in the summer. More rain is dumped on us and high heat gets trapped. Mosquitoes absolutely love this. We know we need to create safer, sustainable, innovative ways to reduce these impacts. Very few, including the town, carry flood insurance. It's expensive, it will get more expensive and harder to get. This is a significant operating expense for our town, which we do not have at the moment, and it should be a concern for all. We, as a committee, have worked hard to identify who and where our most vulnerable residents live. We have intentionally started to tackle these problems. We were the first community to be MVP certified and the first group of communities to become 2.0 certified, the next level. To date, we've received nearly $2 million, and we're hoping for more this spring in the next round. With help from CDC and DPH, we had gotten nearly $500,000 as Deerfield was the lead community to establish the Pioneer Valley Mosquito Control District that covers communities from the Vermont line to the Connecticut line. Their mission is to meticulously monitor and effectively mitigate the transmission of these increasingly prevalent diseases that are a result of climate change. Over the years, we've received $2.5 million from the Emergency Watershed Protection Program administered by Natural Resource and Conservation Services, and nearly $1 million from Mass Works towards projects in town. We ourselves have paid out probably $4 million or a little more in culvert replacements ourselves. The hydrology study today presents a more focused and holistic approach for the South Deerfield Village. The hope is to successfully address the risk facing our residents, businesses, farms, and municipal buildings, including our schools. Working with NRCS PL 566 program and additional MVP funding, together with our partners from NRCS, the Franklin Conservation District, and the Commonwealth, we can build resiliency in each neighborhood down here. We can enjoy the birds, support dragonflies, keep our yards free of mosquitoes without excessive use of pesticides and herbicides that end up in our water systems, improve soil health, store and infiltrate our stormwater. We can build solutions yard by yard to help our partners that support our native plant and pollinator programs. Our individual efforts and actions for the collective whole, the cumulative effort will result in a drier, cooler, and safer South Deerfield. So again, I want to thank you all for coming out and showing your interest today. And I'm going to turn it over to Nick Miller from Field Geology and Rosalie Starvish from GZA, our consultants on this project. So thank you.
Thank you. I did want to mention that one of my colleagues from GZA is attending virtually to listen in case anyone was wondering why there's one person there. So being persnickety.
Slide isn't advancing.
Yeah.
It was working before, so full focus.
That's okay. We're all excited to hear what you have to say.
You just gave it out better. Come back here. So while Rosalie's trying to deal with this, I would just say that it's going to be, we've got a lot of information to present. We'll try to be organized in a way that that's presented. But we've kind of divided the presentation into sections, and we'd encourage, questions after each section. If people have questions,
Sure. Okay.
all right, and then
So this is an overview of what we'll be talking about today. Looking at some different ideas for types of restoration projects, the outcomes of the actual modeling that we've performed, and then what types of projects, resilience projects, might be developed. And we will pause at each of these sections for questions in between, if there are any. All right, so restoration projects. So in developing our work, we considered these different types of restoration projects that might be relevant in the watershed, including stormwater management, crossings, road crossings of Bloody Brook and Sugarloaf Brook, wetland or floodplain storage, providing vegetated buffers along the brooks, maintenance of the channels, in general, watershed management and best management practices. First, we're going to focus on the road stream crossings, which is tied directly to the hydraulic modeling. The modeling that we prepared looked at what happens in Bloody Brook and in Sugarloaf Brook as a result of the inflows to the brook. So basically, you have a certain amount of flow coming in, and then how high can the water get? And it's very useful for looking at the impacts that the stream crossings have, or the road crossings have on the stream. So this chart here shows the various road crossings that we examined in Bloody Brook and on Sugarloaf Brook. And we could use the model to analyze what happens if you actually increase the size of those road crossing openings. Sure.
So just to back up a second, we did previously report on the existing conditions hydraulic model, right? And based on the runs of the existing conditions and what we saw, we selected some different, some more impactful crossings, ones that seem to be having more of an influence on the watershed hydrology and hydraulics. So that's what these on this, in the proposed conditions model, are that we're still showing.
And to set some standards for, how we did this, the items in this chart include that we looked at, what how Mass DOT classifies different roads based on their size and whether they're rural or urban, and, how much traffic they get. And Mass DOT sets the hydraulic design flood based on the type of road. So we looked at that, which is that first column there. And basically what that means is, if for a road where Mass DOT is involved, they would want to say, well, you should design, Kelleher Street, for example, to pass the 10-year flood. And some roads, if they're busier, they have more traffic, they're bigger roads, you might design to a larger flood, because there's more risk involved with a failure. And we also looked at the estimated bankful width. The bankful width is the width of a stream. If you filled up a stream right to the tip of its banks before it starts spilling out, that is the bankful width. That width can be identified in the field, but it can also be estimated using information from USGS. So for this project, we used the USGS estimates. So the bankful width of Bloody Brook ranges from about 15 to 20 feet. And then Sugarloaf Brook is more about, 10 to 15 feet. And then the column that says 1.2 times bankful width, that is how we identified a proposed culvert width. Because that is a criteria that's listed in the Massachusetts Stream Crossing Standards, that the width of your road crossing should be at least 1.2 times the bankful width. And this is what we used for the modeling. If any one of these culverts was selected for further design, we might examine these criteria a little more closely, do a little bit more field investigation and refine these criteria. But for the purposes of doing a model that looked at multiple roads, we wanted to use like a standardized approach. So to run the model, we decided to look at both the 10-year and the 25-year. And we chose that because those were, most of the crossings had that listed as the Mass DOT hydraulic design flood. We typically estimated the new opening as a rectangular culvert, except for a few here, the ones that are highlighted in peach there. We had assumed that those would be an arch because they were existing as an arch. And we did multiple scenarios. We looked at each culvert individually and what that does. And then we also looked at different combinations of improving maybe 2 or 3 culverts at the same time. And then we examined the results first by looking at whether or not the structure is overtopped or that road gets overtopped. So does it get overtopped in the existing condition? And then when you enlarge the size of the road opening, can we remove that overtopping condition? But we also looked at the overall flood limit. So those are 2 different ways that we examined the results. So I'm going to talk about the results of what the simulations we did for Bloody Brook. And one of the things we did was we actually looked at what would happen if there were no obstructions of road crossings along Bloody Brook. And we did that by simulating, a 50-foot corridor around Bloody Brook that had no obstructions by the roads, just to see, I think it gives you a picture of the best case scenario. If you're able to actually enlarge all of your crossings so that they don't present an impact to the brook itself. And I have two versions of a chart like this. The line across that shows up on the bottom, the red line, that's just showing the bottom of the brook itself. And then the vertical pink lines are where the road crossings are, and they're labeled. And then the three blue lines are simulations for the 10-year flood, the 25-year flood, and the 100-year flood is at the top. So this is showing what the brook would look like if there were no obstructions from road crossings. And then I'll point out in the red circle is Kelleher. And you can see there that even though Kelleher isn't actually presenting an obstruction in the way that the model is set up, it's still being overtopped. So that demonstrates that there's more to Kelleher than just the fact that maybe the opening for that culvert is not big enough. And then we show this again. This is just showing the difference between the existing in the dark blue, and then the light blue is the proposed, as if there are no road crossings obstructing the flow. And this is the 25-year. So you can see that with those dark blue lines, how basically many of these roads kind of almost act as a dam holding that water back. But if the road obstructions aren't there, the water flows through and you have kind of more of a flow downwards along the brook. And again, Kelleher is still overtopped, or close to being overtopped. There. So with Kelleher, we think that, you know, there's just some factors there. Being one is the topography, that there's somewhat of a natural constriction, and also you have like a tributary coming in to join Bloody Brook just upstream of that, so you have extra flow coming in. So this here shows the kind of a relief map, so to speak, of the topography, and you can kind of see that the higher elevations along the edges of the brook kind of come together a little bit near Kelleher.
I think the additional water is what Peter James and Bob Decker had spoke about before. Is that correct? Coming off the mountain?
Yeah, I think certainly that is some of it.
Yeah. Okay.
So this chart here shows, this is just, if you look at each crossing individually, so the red are showing those conditions where there's projected overtopping of the road. And so, for example, if we take Kelleher Drive in the 10-year, you know, even if we upgrade the Kelleher Drive culvert by itself, you get very little change with the overtopping condition. If you look at I think Pleasant Street, if you enlarge Pleasant Street, you can go from, you know, in the 10-year event, you have overtopping in existing conditions, but then if you enlarge it, you've reduced that overtopping condition. So this chart is like at a glance, if you upgraded each one of these road crossings individually, what type of results you would get.
Yeah, so those numbers are the water surface elevations that are modeled, right? So you got 1 foot reduction in the water surface at Pleasant Street. If you take the existing, you know, 5-foot culvert and put in an 18-foot culvert, which is what it should be, right? Or whatever those numbers are. Whereas Kelleher Drive, basically don't change the water surface by improving that to the state standards.
Okay.
I'm sorry, just a quick clarification, I was looking at this earlier. So if you do all the culvert increases in size, spend that time and money, the most we might reduce is 1 foot of flow,
No, that chart is just for one culvert at a time.
one at a time. Okay,
Yeah, so it's
thanks.
almost like, ignore all the other ones, just look at the one, you know, so if you were only going to do North Main Street. In North Main Street, you don't have overtopping in the 10-year right now, but you do have overtopping in the 25-year, but if you made that culvert bigger, you could reduce that 25-year overtopping.
By 1.1 feet.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
But if they did more than one, is there a cumulative effect?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sorry, I probably did that.
Yeah.
So,
yep, that's exactly right. So, yeah, if we do more than one, there's a cumulative benefit. And
Okay.
we have slides on that.
Okay, I think we should move on, only because we don't want to lose people. And actually, the 10-year and 25-year, honestly, is like nuisance flooding. We're really more concerned with more serious events, truthfully.
So we looked at, on Bloody Brook, we looked at combining the actual railroad, the downstream end near the school. There's a pedestrian crossing there and Pleasant Street. So what happens if you, do all three of those at the same time? And, on the left is the existing conditions in the 25-year, and the right is the proposed conditions. And so these areas circled in blue, if you look, that blue water limit there is decreased. And then in that upper area too, you can see there's less flooding that happens there. And then to show this with the chart version, you get rid of the overtopping condition for both Pleasant Street and pedestrian crossing. For these two simulations that we did. And then, but we also realized that making changes at the railroad might be a very long-term endeavor. So we wanted to see, well, what if you can't change the railroad, but we still change the Pleasant and the pedestrian bridge. And there still is benefit from doing that. So, again, you have, a decrease in that limit of flooding shown. And then with a chart, you have improvements at Pleasant Street. With the pedestrian crossing, you don't have the same, reduction in overtopping for the bigger storm, but that may not be as critical for the town because it's a pedestrian crossing. And we did the same type of thing for Sugarloaf Brook. So again, this type of chart, this is showing the water for the 10, 25, and 100 year, as if there are no obstructions from the roads. And then again, looking at for the 25-year, the existing is the dark blue, and then what would happen if you removed all those road obstructions is shown in the light blue. This chart is showing each culvert upgrade as a standalone. So you actually, do get some benefits for these road crossings by upgrading them. And we are taking a look here at Kelleher Drive. So Kelleher, there are crossings of Kelleher crosses both Bloody Brook and Sugarloaf Brook. And so in the red circle here is the crossing at Sugarloaf Brook. And if the results are a bit dramatic here, so if you see, let me just go back here. With the current culvert at Culver Drive, it's actually crushed, so it's undersized, but it's even more undersized because it's crushed, so the water gets held back and then it starts to flow down Kelleher Drive according to this model. So if you upgrade that culvert on Sugarloaf Brook, you remove that flooding that goes down Kelleher, but you do get a little bit more water into the farm fields that are downstream, so that's shown in the blue circle. And then we also have, we're showing here the Sugarloaf Street, and you can see that, the, extent of flooding is reduced by upgrading Sugarloaf Street here. And then Nick's gonna jump in and talk about how some of these, assessments show changes to where structures are being inundated as a result of the flooding.
Yeah, so we looked at, the structure, the footprints of all the buildings in town, right? So they're municipal buildings, their houses, their garages. We're not differentiating them in this count. But in the existing conditions model, it's showing that at the 10-year flow, there are 31 structures in town that are partially inundated by floodwater. And in the 25-year flow, that increases to 43 structures. And then if you look to the right, that shows the model is in the 10-year flow, and the parts of the houses and garages that are underwater or have water around their foundations are shown in red. This is upstream of 130 North Main Street, a private driveway, and you can see that there are 5 structures there that are inundated in the 10-year flood. The photo you see there was given to me by some landowners who live there, and it shows their garage, surrounded by water, which they say is a fairly regular occurrence, and it's happened several times in their residency here. So we believe that this is fairly accurate. And then in the 100-year flood, which I'm not showing you, but that structure inundation actually increases to 63. Now those numbers are Bloody Brook plus Sugar Brook. It's for the total of the 2 streams. But since we did the no culvert simulation where we removed not only the culverts and bridges, but also the roadway approaches that can often dam up the stream, in those model runs, we still have some structures that are inundated. And so it's 7 in the 10-year flow and 9 in the 25-year flow. So that tells us that, there's more going on here than just undersized crossings, right? There's still going to be some structures that are flooded, even if there are no roads in town, basically. This table on the left is just basically, a distribution of the geography of where these structures are that are flooding based on the model results. And so, for example, on Bloody Brook, upstream of the upper railroad crossing, there are 3 structures inundated in the 10-year flow. It kind of gives you an idea of where the concentration of flooding is. And those slide I showed you last, where we highlighted 130 North Main Street, there's a reason for that, because in this, there are actually 7 structures inundated upstream of that. Similarly, another one that's like kind of a hot spot is upstream of Sugarloaf Street on Sugarloaf Brook itself. There are 9 crossings. And that one upstream of Crestview Drive. Crestview Drive is actually to the southeast, and there's at least in the model, there's a small tributary that's unnamed that flows north and eventually joins Sugarloaf Brook upstream of Sugarloaf Street. So there's one house on there that's also showing inundation.
Just to repeat, this is the existing conditions that we already have experiencing, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so then we can look at comparing that existing condition to proposed condition and what that does in terms of improving the extent of inundation and what structures we can remove from that area of inundation. And that's what I'm going to go through in these next few slides. This slide focuses on that private driveway at 130 North Main Street. There's a couple of photos of the crossing there shown on the screen. And we can see that by just upgrading that one private driveway, you would remove 9 structures from inundation. Okay, so then North Main Street itself, the the larger road, if we upgrade with that one just on its own, in the 10-year flow, we would remove 6 structures from inundation. And in the 25-year, we get a little bit more and we remove 1 additional structure. So 7 come out of inundation. And these again are just looking at improving that one individual crossing. But what if we improved North Main Street and private driveway 130 North Main Street and the private driveway at Bloody Brook Farm, which is 144 North Main Street, along with Caliper Drive? So we're doing 4 crossings upgraded, 2 actual roads and 2 private driveways. In that case, in the model run, we see that 13 structures are removed from inundation, almost like half as many as are flooded in the whole town, just by, so that's a fairly significant result. Also in the 25-year, we have 11 removed. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, can you just go back for 1 second? That one thing that's interesting about this is if you look in kind of on the map I'm showing you with the model flood extent, those benefits are extending all the way up to Jackson Road. So you can see, maybe it's hard to see on your screen, but the difference between the purple inundation as the proposed condition and that lighter blue existing, that footprint of a flooding is different all the way up to Jackson Road outflow from that culvert. So it's pretty far, a large portion of Bloody Brook is improved by this. But one of the structures that seems the most impactful in terms of upgrading is this Sugarloaf Street crossing. That's a photo of it up at the upper left. This is a very complicated crossing because we know there are multiple pipes that are connecting. What you see at the upstream end of the inlet is not at all what you see at the outlet. It goes by the old cemetery and adjacent to the auto shop there, the garage. But by improving this structure and getting it up to the proposed condition that meet state standards. I actually can't read it because it's cut off on the screen.
We removed 9 structures in the 10-year and 15 in the 25-year.
Right, so all the flooding that we see upstream of Sugarloaf Street, those inundation structures will be removed by upgrading that one. It doesn't do anything to address the flooding that we see at Crestview Drive, but it's fairly significant.
Quick question. So that stops at Sugarloaf Drive. They come around the corner to go past the cemetery. There's another culvert, and then go down to Coates Alley. Through there and down around. Did you look downstream? Because there's 2 or 3 more.
Yes.
And then would affect that. So I'm just wondering there's anything you need to start downstream and work up, or?
We looked at the Coates Avenue crossing. We also looked at Thayer Street.
Yeah.
And they did have some benefits, but not to this extent.
All right. Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions?
Does anyone have any questions? This is a little bit, it's disconnected a little bit from our presentation, the last, session we had. But Pam, did you have a question? Yes.
Yeah, I'm Kim Predwater, and I live at 36 Grave Street. On the last picture, the screen that you had, does show Grave Street, and in that upper far right corner, where you see the purple on both sides of the street, we own both sides of that. And we do experience flooding. And we were kind of disappointed that we hoped that there would be more work done up at our end of Blacksmith Brook, if that's what you're calling it. But in fact, nothing was done up there. And we've been coming to all the presentations we've had, trying to figure out what we can do, because we've had flooding, not only in our driveway, but also, they had a couple of years ago, they had to replace the culvert because the street collapsed. Large holes on both sides of the street. So I'm just interested to know, I guess, are there any plans, any work to be done? Because that's on this screen, this is the first thing I've seen that actually shows Grave Street, where we live, and so I'm still concerned about that. And I know this is a little aside from what you've been presenting, but we've been wanting to get a couple of trees on either side, and at this point, they're going, on the side of the stream bank, and we're concerned about whether they're gonna fall down, but we've been told, I believe by the Conservation Commission, we can't do it. That because trying to remove those trees would potentially damage the bank of the stream. And I do know that some neighbors of ours over on Eastern Avenue have just taken down trees there, and apparently nothing was said. But, we were trying to be mindful about what we were allowed and what we weren't allowed. So we still do have some concerns. That's it.
No, yeah, definitely. So, what we've been doing is we walked both streams and mapped, all of Bloody Brook and Sugarloaf Brook, and then built the existing conditions model, build a proposed conditions model. And part of what we're hoping to do today is, we're going to talk about types of projects, identifying potential projects, prioritizing, and we want to get feedback from the community and from the board here about what we would like to move, people would like to move forward with, because we are going to be coming up with 2 conceptual designs for 2 separate projects. MVP grant funding is open now, so hopefully the town will be applying for lots of money to do things. So we did look at the Graves Avenue, and I have with me the mapping we did, as well as a hydraulic model. So if there is more detail you want to see right around your neighborhood, we can look at that after it's time comes.
Can I just want to clarify, if the culvert that we're seeing there is the one that is very long and it goes from the former fire department, we were climbing in it in the winter. Okay, thank you.
It's actually a state culvert, but
Yeah, no, that's.
we're working with Mass DOT.
The only question I have really quick is you had it listed in the original slides as 2.67 feet high in height. For some reason, when I crawled in it, I was able to crawl in it relatively easy. Like, this is not 2.67 feet.
Is that from the downstream end?
No, that was the upstream.
The downstream end, 2.7 feet?
I don't know. I haven't crawled in the downstream.
So I know that when you're standing there and shining a flashlight, you look in, it's not too far before before, you're not in that, shaped crossing, you're in a smaller crossing with a lower ceiling.
Yeah, I think we looked at both ends of the culvert and the downstream end is much smaller than the upstream end. And so for the modeling, you know, we consider that constriction as like the defining, you know, that's gonna hold back the water. So our model is not so detailed that we know all of the dimensions of the entire culvert from the, you know, the upstream all the way to the downstream. We just simulate it as the smaller section. So that's probably where that comes from. Any question?
Yeah, Jason McCarthy, the one North Main Street. A lot of the stuff you're talking about, potential impacts, 10 years, 25 years, so. First, let's say for best case example, you're able to accomplish this, widen culverts. At what point is there also, you know, later this, when you're gonna start looking at the zoning, because I mean, if you potentially invest these millions of dollars, all these things to help flooding, improve it over a 25-year flow. If you only think about the zoning and you actually cut, I mean, you have ADUs coming online now, you know, different housing around here and everything, are you undoing that at the same time period, or 25 years from now? We may be back to where we're at, square one again. Just throwing that out there.
Well, one of the things, the reason why we're trying to do this holistically is because you're looking at the whole picture. And you have to build capacity somewhere. And that would be one of the considerations, Jason, is what do we have to do to make it not worse?
But what I'm just saying is, I mean, in conjunction with it, you should be looking at zoning along corporate saying, okay, if we start adding all the structures on here, this is just gonna reverse everything that's being invested. So that's just my.
What we're trying to do, we're trying to make this, basically, we want to make the downtown South Deerfield Village be a sponge. In the last time that Rosalie and Nick were here, they gave us the impact of the proposed 100-year flood going forward. And so the idea is to look under this PL 566, which is a prevention and for the whole watershed program, flood prevention, is you're trying to figure out how to make everything you do in the downtown a sponge. So even if you build up the area, you build in holding tanks. You build a parking lot, it's a holding tank with pervious surface so that it will absorb water. And if you think about it, our goal, I don't know how many gallons, you said it was, what was it? 250 acre.
Yeah, we're gonna-
250 acre feet.
Yeah, well, we have a slide on that.
Okay, I won't them up. But what you're trying to do is that's the top end. So every project, like the Leary lot, that may be like 1 million gallons roughly. It's not a tank, but it's enough filtration that it will hold the stormwater runoff. So what you're doing is you're building it up. And everything you do, every rain garden, every buffer, everything that people plant is absorbing water. And you're turning all of South Deerfield into a big sponge, basically. And you're trying to reach that 250 acre gallon kind of area. So I'll turn it back over to you because I'm not really that great with the math, but I do know that we have a ways to go.
All right, so we were just talking about this a little bit. So identifying different types of projects, right? So stormwater management is a type of project that the town can, can look into, right? And what we're talking about here, we're talking about reducing the volumes and rates of stormwater runoff by allowing rainwater to infiltrate, as Carolyn just said, through porous pavement. That's a great thing. We're trying to hold this water near its source and not let it all flood into South Deerfield as quickly as it is currently. Right, so strategies for that include using impervious cover, which is fairly high. And just as a reminder, I personally think that probably Deerfield was once largely wetlands, before,
Yeah.
before settlement, so trying to get back to that in whatever extent we can, while, balancing the need for growth, is important. Right, but we're trying to increase our capacity, and, figure out ways to convey that excess runoff. So I don't know if folks are here who can see this. Can you do that? Yeah. All right, so there's a little, very simple table, and I'll explain what this table is. So in order for Bloody Brook to, for what is now like a 25-year flood, we thought, well, if you wanted to take a 25-year flood and turn it into flooding of a 2-year flood. So we're gonna like take it all the way down in order of magnitude. And how would you do that? And so we tried to calculate how much storage would be needed to take a fairly large flood, 25-year, down to a 2-year. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And so we calculated, and this is, not exact, but 250 acre feet. So that's 250 acres a foot deep of water, which is a lot of water. The whole Bloody Brook watershed, as far as getting down to South Deerfield Village, is just over 1,400 acres. So you're talking about like 17% of the what? So that's a lot. And similarly with Sugarloaf Brook, we're
Yeah,
talking
sorry,
about
the-
50 acres. Yes.
You said the whole watershed is 1,400 or something like
1,400.
Okay, okay, that's great. I just, that clarification, I'm trying to.
Yeah, so 1,421 acres.
Yeah,
Nick, does that go as far as Jackson Street, the wetlands up there?
Yeah, so that would be everything, on the other side of Route 5 and 10, and, by the Magic Wings, basically, coming down through the railroad, coming down by Jackson Street and through to the lower railroad here, by us today.
So I just want to caveat that this is a gross approximation with what we could do from the model that we developed. And it's simply looking at the difference in volume. So the flood volume during a 25-year flood versus the flood volume during a 2-year flood. And you take that volume and you say, we should store that. But the reality is when you get stormwater runoff, it's not just about a volume, there's also how fast is it coming? How quickly can you get it into the ground? So, it is a gross approximation, but maybe gives something to kind of work towards.
Okay.
So another type of project is wetland and floodplain storage. So we can use restoring wetlands or creating floodplain connectivity, connection to floodplain, or allowing areas to flood by actually lowering the surface and providing space for the water to be stored. And so I just have some kind of bullet points here on this slide of some of the benefits of wetlands from some published studies. Of course, we know that wetlands reduce flooding by absorbing this excess rainfall and slowly releasing it, like the sponge that Carolyn was talking about. It's pretty much for granted. They've done a lot of studies that kind of back of the envelope calculation for a 1 acre wetland, it can store 1 to 1.5 million gallons of water. And then, let me just go back 1 second. And then, oftentimes people restore wetlands for other things like water quality impacts. And we know that wetlands not only store water, but they store pollutants and nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, ammonium, and other things. And part of this is through the plants that store these nutrients, pollutants, and water in the plants themselves. And those plants provide important habitat for biodiversity, for dragonflies, which eat mosquitoes, for a lot of the, animals that we kind of depend on.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So a 1 acre wetland restoration, 1 to 1.5 million gallons. What portion of that 1.5 million gallons is this 250 foot acre or whatever measurement you were using before? I mean, how much of water is in the big thing and how does that compare to the little thing?
Right, good question. Rosalie can do some calculations. We'll have to convert gallons to
Scientific terms,
acre
I mean,
feet. Yeah,
Like.
no, that's a very good question. And that photo right there is a stormwater basin at the elementary school.
So I can say that there's about 325,000 gallons in 1 acre foot.
You're
oh, wait, wait,
So like,
So if we had a 100-year storm, going back to the big ones versus the more nuisance ones, what are we talking about?
I think so.
I think based on the calculation that Rosalie just did, it seemed like a 1 acre wetland could store about 3 acre feet of water.
Okay,
So the 250, would be about,
Divided by 3. Yeah.
3, so you're about 80, so you need about 80 acres of wetland.
Yeah.
well,
Yeah, and so of course, it's storing it in the soil, storing it in that organic layer, and it's, moss or whatever, and then storing it in plants themselves, so.
It would depend on the type of wetland too, whether it's a marsh or a bog or a
Yeah, all wetlands are not
scrub
created
or
equal.
anything like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you're saying in addition to the wetlands that we currently have, we would need an
no,
extra 80? No? Okay.
how much do we have now, do you think? In that 1,400 acres, what are we looking at?
I don't know, we could look at that.
Okay, if you could figure out where we are right now, that would be great, as far as what we have existing.
Right, yeah, that's a good point.
Because we might want to protect those areas.
Yeah, well, we're gonna build them in for calculations for sure.
So these are a couple photos of a restored wetland in eastern Pennsylvania. And I just showed you these to just kind of show you some pictures of what a wetland restoration site could look like. And then that's just showing you how a wetland, kind of deals with nutrients. Another type of project that we could identify in Brook and Sugarloaf Brook are vegetated riparian buffers, buffer enhancements. FERCog did a watershed-based study of Brook, and they found that the riparian buffers are sorely lacking. I would second that from walking all of Brook and Sugarloaf Brook. And of course, buffers are, do a similar thing as wetlands in terms of storing water through the uptake of water by the trees and shrubs and goldenrod and everything that's growing. But those are just a couple studies that I wanted to point out in terms of the efficacy of reducing sediment and nutrient loading that's been shown by riparian buffers, and also reducing that nutrient and sediment loading from agricultural fields is very effective. Of course, there are ecosystem benefits, dragonflies, birds, all that as well.
If I think the real details, but you might again what the percentage of riparian buffering on the Brook is right now.
I would have to look that up.
Yeah, I think it was in your last.
Yeah, it was.
Really, really limited.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so another type of project is channel maintenance. I think at our last meeting, there might have been a comment about how, in the past, there were ditches that were maintained. We know that the flows in Bloody Brook and Sugarloaf Brook can be constricted by the accumulation of organic materials from leaf litter and lawn clippings. I'm also aware that the town has worked on this a little bit. I took some of these photos from work that my colleague did, Adrian, looking at a certain, a portion of channel and identifying how to get permitting for that. And I think that effort could be expanded if the town were to look at identifying, where are there channels that would be classified as wetlands versus channels that actually aren't wetlands. And then get those established as these can be maintained. Anything that's a wetland, it's more complicated to actually, dredge them. But if there are sections of channels that are not classified as wetlands, then those could be maintained on a regular basis. So that is one option for the town to pursue.
Yeah, just a quick question on that, because Chief and I walked that whole area quite a few times, and there is a part of that, the brook that comes down that is not a wetland. That was kind of surprising, so that can be done without permit. The rest of it did require federal permitting, so I was kind of wondering whether it would not require wetlands permits. I didn't know if you were talking about agricultural permits, because there's a lot of culverts in town that could be an agricultural exemption for the owner to clean if they follow certain rules. But I didn't know if there was other types of exemptions, but a lot of it is in wetlands, and it would really have to be a wetland study to identify what culvert is or what channel we maintain is within or without. And noting that the town of Deerfield does have a bundled NOI that could be brought to us, or not to us, but the Conservation Commission to review some of those to start that process. So I was just wondering, that was a clarification, but
Yeah, I think if it's a channel that actually flows intermittently, so first it has to be intermittent, and then if it has any bordering vegetated wetlands connected to it hydraulically, then that automatically makes it a wetland. But if it's intermittent and it has none of those bordering vegetated wetlands, and it's been reviewed as a wetland scientist, yeah, we can say that this is not a wetland. Then all those areas can be mapped and,
the soils morphology has to be
yeah,
completed as well, not just for
yeah.
DPW. Yeah, but it's a good point. Thanks for
And Pam, maybe that's when we can get your address to Nick and Rosalie and try to figure out if you're one of the ones that is considered wetlands or maintenance.
It is intermittent. Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I mean, we kind of saw this as a pretty good one, just based on what we've seen out there and what, Pete and the police chief have seen as well. There's a lot of debris being dumped in the streams.
Yes, so that goes actually, right, this thing's not gonna work now, I clicked off with it.
While she's clicking, the riparian, how deep do you have to go from bank to, to get a benefit? Like, is it 5 feet? Is it 10 feet? Is it 15 feet?
There's not, as far as I'm concerned or aware, there's not like a magic number. I think having 5 feet is worlds better than having 0. And then probably, it's diminishing returns as you go from, especially if you went from like 20 to 25, you're not gonna see that much difference, right? But I think, we're gonna look at some sites in the next section we can talk about.
Excellent.
I've been on the conservation district for about 20 years, and generally, Tim, it's about 10 feet, seems to be optimal, because it's wide enough to, most people, it's abutting agricultural land, so you want to put shrubs rather than trees. And so you just need enough space to have a robust shrubbery row, basically. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And the people who mowed all the way to the bank, if they just let 5 feet go into bush, they can see a benefit.
Yes.
Thank you.
Along Bloody Brook, that's why we've had our workshops on native plants, because native plants have roots that act as absorbers and release during droughts, so it's that kind of thing. Okay, so keep going.
So, yeah, Nick said, we are gonna, we've kind of done an overview. We are gonna get into some examples of, areas in the town, but this is the last slide in terms of types of projects, and this is more of like management ideas. I know that there was a question at the last meeting about spring waters and concerns about, groundwater and basement flooding. And a study to look at groundwater is definitely beyond the scope of what we did. But the state has been studying groundwater, so that is something to think about, maybe connecting with the state on that and seeing, what they can do in this area. And then in general, in terms of the yard debris and, blowing leaves into the brook, just having some sort of educational campaign. This has been done, especially in terms of keeping nutrients out of the brook, but educating homeowners, but also the landscapers that work in town. That could be something that could be done. Now we're gonna move over to kind of getting more focused on what these projects are. Again, this is the overall list of the different types of projects. So we're gonna get a little bit into some examples or actual projects in Deerfield. So to get back to the road stream crossings, we do think it's worth looking at replacing both of those culverts at Pleasant Street and the pedestrian bridge. It also provides benefit upstream as well by doing those two culverts. And improves conditions right near the elementary school. At Kelleher Drive, we, just as a recap, we talked about simply upgrading the crossing on Bloody Brook. Will not provide significant benefit. But I think, looking at upgrading the Kelleher Drive crossing on Sugarloaf Brook and how that impacts Bloody Brook, maybe a little more study was needed for that area in the future.
But you did say that you did document that as collapse, right?
The one on Sugarloaf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's on my head list.
It is, okay, I want to make sure.
Yeah, I haven't hit beat up on that yet, so don't mention too much.
Just one question though, on Kelleher Drive proposed at 24 feet by 5.3 feet, so 24, length,
Yeah, with,
I'm sorry, and then on your earlier existing conditions, it's, 5.85 by 4.6. So that is a 20-foot increase in width.
yeah, and that's what we did
Okay,
for this modeling.
go back and forth between the
I
numbers
think-
there. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I would just say that when it comes time, if you get to the point where like, yeah, we're gonna do this crossing, we're gonna get design permitting, the designers are going to want to examine it, separately again, but we had to come up with some standards to follow for our modeling. But that can be, customized as needed.
John, those are in your hit list, right? That you were talking about,
Which ones?
the Kelleher Drive and Pleasant Street.
Pleasant is, yes.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah, Pleasant's got the sewer main going right through it,
all right. And
holding
then
water back.
in Coates Avenue, did you have that one? I don't remember that one.
Coates Ave, yes. And the backside of Fisher's Garage from Sugarloaf Street, yes. There's a lot of debris in there as well that Pete and I looked at.
Okay,
A lot of organic material.
all right.
And Pam, you're on the hit list. Yours is already engineered, it's already been approved by Conservation Commission. We don't have the money yet to hire a contract.
And what is that?
That is basically to restore the original elevations So basically go in, we don't use the word dredge, we use restore to take it back down to the natural elevation of the stream. It's already been through Conservation Commission, they've already issued the notice of intent. I just don't have the money to do it.
Okay, so on Sugarloaf Brook, we definitely think, Sugarloaf Street should be a priority. It will be more complicated. But it should be a priority to eventually move forward with that. And then with Coates Ave, it didn't show up as being a flood concern in the 10-year storm, but in bigger storms, it does flood. So, looking at a 10-year, what's helpful about that is it is the flooding that happens more often. So, obviously a big flood can cause a lot of damage, but it also would be less frequent, so.
I know, it's just the 10 and 25 year is getting to be like nuisance flooding from here to, the bigger storms. So I know it is not, and I feel very badly for people, but they just occur so often.
All right, so, this is a potential stormwater storage project. So this is a town-owned lot, and I feel like when we're trying to look for, potential projects and potential ways to, tackle this problem of flooding, we're kind of limited, right? There's a lot of, density in the South Deerfield Village. So looking at town-owned parcels and being opportunistic is, one way to proceed. So this is a 8.5 acre lot. It's just south of the Pelican plant. It's across North Main Street from Bloody Brook. But there could be some potential for some co-benefits going forward, depending on how the town decided to use a lot like this. You could, look at this as a way to mitigate flooding and store some stormwater from that Pelican impervious surface, at the Pelican plant, as well as store some water coming off the railroad grade. This could be, done in such a way where you would, maintain the ability for recreation, ball fields, or whatever else the town wanted to do. But as this kind of centrally located town-owned lot, it seems like an obvious one to mention. Also, given its proximity to that large impervious surface at the plant. So I don't have any actually specific ideas necessarily, but just thought it would be something to bring up. In looking for sites for potential wetland restoration, this is a site that is privately owned. It's just upstream of the upper railroad crossing. So, again, north of Jackson Road, south of Magic Wings, in that area. And you can see on the upper left of the slide, that's what a photo of the crossing through the railroad grade looks like. It's a stacked granite structure. It's very small, less than 2 feet wide. And in reality, I met with some of the landowners out there, and they said that, most of the time the stream is dry, but as soon as it rains, everything floods. So it's either like feast or famine. It's either a dry intermittent stream, or it's a lake being impounded upstream of the undersized railroad crossing. So upgrading that crossing is obviously something that could happen, but in lieu of that, we could, look at this area as somewhere to actually, enhance what is now soggy turf grass and make it an actual functional wetland. I would also say that in this area, in the blue circle there on the slide, showing you the inundation in the 10-year end, in that area, there's a septic situation with the leach field, and there seemed to be fairly obviously something going on with that leach field being basically in what is a regularly inundated area. Another, potential site for wetland restoration is this 144 North Main Street, Bloody Brook Farm. On the upper left, that's a photo of the driveway going over after kind of normal rainfall event. You see that there's a pond upstream of that undersized crossing. We've already talked about upgrading that, and yeah, you know, in conjunction with those other ones, I showed that there was a pretty big benefit in terms of removing structures from the area of inundation. You also, though, within this property, within the area that's currently flooding relatively frequently, there's some opportunity, I think, for wetland enhancement and, you know, building a more of a functional wetland, again, like replacing the turf grass with some wetland plants and something that would actually have some water quality benefits and some, you know, act more like a sponge to give some of that water relief.
I do know they have a conservation plan and that they would be willing to participate.
So this is another one, in terms of like being opportunistic. These are two centrally located town parcels. They're listed there on the top bullet. There's a parcel, you know, almost 3.4 acres, and next to a parcel of 2.8 acres. So you've got about 6 acres of town property. It's just to the north of the dead end side of Rayburn Road. So this is upstream of Grave Street, where Sugarloaf Brook crosses Grave Street. I believe there's maybe some future plans for some senior housing potentially at the site. So that, you know, who knows? But this site looks to me as an, you know, opportunity to maybe have some floodplain storage of water. Right now, that's the existing condition model on the right. You can see that Sugarloaf Brook is kind of flooding into the farm fields a little bit. It flows down that ditch, takes a 90-degree turn to the right, then takes another 90-degree turn and flows down the margin of these two town parcels. So it probably would not a stretch to say that you could, you know, create a wetland or a floodplain storage opportunity here, and, you know, mitigate some of this flooding that we're seeing in Sugarloaf Brook.
Would you be able to, if you did do something strategic here, would you be able to reduce the flooding of the adjacent agricultural fields? It would be able to suck the water down from that area.
Right, so we would probably want to, you know, model what that proposed condition would be, right? So how much are you lowering it? How many acres are you lowering? What's the shape of it? And then you can have the model tell you what the actual benefit is, but we haven't, you know, gotten there. So we're just kind of brainstorming different options and opportunities that we saw. And then as far as recommended buffer planting on the Galensky farm on Sugarloaf Brook, there is definitely a lack of buffer. So there's a little inset photo there in the center of the slide at the top where you can see some sediment coming off that agricultural field and into like a little fan coming out into a little delta of sand. So after probably a normal rain event, you know, there's a lot of sand and silt coming off the field into the stream, partly because there is no buffer, right? So this would be an opportunity, and, you know, again, this could be something like 10 feet, you know, something that's not going to take off any acreage out of arable, you know, land that is being used. But and as Carolyn said, you want to plan carefully with shrubs that aren't going to shade out the row crops, you know, that they're planting here, but working with the farmer. There's also a lot of organizations that will do an easement, so the farmer can be compensated for, you know, the ecosystem value that we're getting, right, by having a buffer, that can be, compensating the farmer for that.
Yes, and there's CSP program that, allows the farmer to do temporary easement of 5 years and pays for the buffer. So that's a yearly program.
So there's, opportunities here where I'm showing you on Sugarloaf Brook, but there's also a lot of, agricultural fields without buffers. Particularly in the upper part of Bloody Brook and, particularly on some of the unnamed tributaries into Bloody Brook. So there's a lot of opportunities. It doesn't have to be something so big as this either. And, anywhere we can plant a buffer would be a good thing. This just seems like one that's fairly scalable.
I just had a question. One of the programs that we try to push is cover crop. Is there a cover crop that is more absorbent than another cover crop?
I'm sure there is, and we'd have to talk to NRCS about that.
Okay, well, they don't really suggest one or the other. I just wondered if you knew.
I know somebody at Bass.
Okay, it would be great if we could get some kind of recommendation.
So this is just a kind of so what we're hoping to get after this couple slides is have a discussion and like to, have people ask questions, and if there's places we didn't see or if you have questions about any of them that we have shown, we really want some guidance on which two we want to bring forward to conceptual design. This is basically a very simplified table kind of showing us cost benefits of these different projects. Right, so these are infrastructure improvement type projects. So for example, upgrading Pleasant Street and the pedestrian bridge, has the highest cost. And we're seeing, 2 raindrops, so kind of the intermediate benefit, right? And this would be like a long-term project, and that's, the project timeline is more based on how soon a project could happen. So the short-term project like riparian planting on Sugarloaf Brook, we could probably find funding in the next few months. Potentially that could be implemented this year, and you see benefits within a year, right? So that's a short term versus wetland restoration on Bloody Brook Farm is fairly simple too, but it would be more involved permitting. So that would be something, more of like a 3 to 5 year, timeline. Right? So that's kind of what this is meant to show. Any questions looking at that?
Well, I was actually hoping either John Pachork or John Pachork Senior, based on your experience, John Pachork Senior, or your current experience, John Junior. What is your input on this?
I find that this is very interesting, but I don't really have anything of quality to add.
I was just looking.
They know what they're talking about. So there's nothing that I can turn around and teach them, or try and convince them they're wrong.
Well, I was.
And if they could turn around and save more water, make the earth turn colder and get more snow like we have outside. We have a lot of storage space.
That's true.
How about you, John?
Okay, I guess, ultimately, we have a few months to put together a couple of conceptual designs, and we don't want to tell the town what we think should be focused on. It's more than just one of these projects is going to solve all your problems, and that's the one we should focus on, because that's really not the case. But we would like to hear some, thoughts on what would be of most value at this time to at least kind of start a design process on. And we have another table as well. So this is like more of the infrastructure type projects, but we did a similar table for, more like long-term additional studies, in terms of, storing stormwater at town-owned parcels, or doing the ditch mapping, or the educational campaign. So we just wanted to have those on the list as well.
Can I just ask a quick question? If you looked at, floodwater storage potential on Jackson Street further east, because I live across the street and I know it used to be a marsh, but it's all filled in over the years.
I mean, we looked at it in the way that we looked at everywhere, by modeling of a watershed and by mapping it. We're talking about on Bloody Brook itself.
Yeah.
Just upstream of the Jackson Road culvert, or Jackson. Like where Bloody Brook flows under Jackson. Or there's also some tributary that.
Yeah, but further down the street.
Further down the street.
So
Okay,
as you
yeah.
go towards the dead end, towards the farm fields, on the north side, it was a marsh. So it's, it's not yet farmable, when I fill in enough so that it will be in, 10 years, but, when you mentioned floodplain lowering, it's just a place that I know had a lot of floodplain storage, 10 years ago.
Julie, you had a question?
I'm just interested in the depth of level of flood. Is that like number of structures impacted or square feet of water? How are you defining?
This is really qualitative. It's just trying to visualize a way to compare different types of projects. Like sometimes it's hard to compare an infrastructure upgrade project or a stormwater project, which is very engineering specific to like a wetlands project or channel maintenance project. So we're just trying to give you something very qualitative and as a way to compare them and start a conversation usably.
Yeah, and also, we have not been able to do, a more robust analysis of each one of these to actually quantify that level of flood mitigation. But if we took one of these and made it our conceptual design, we could do a more thorough review of that one particular project.
Well, I'm voting for the Kelleher Drive of the Sugarloaf Brook crossing
Pleasant Street,
in Pleasant Street.
Pleasant
Yeah.
Street.
Yeah.
Your first choke point on the Bloody Brook is not the railroad. It is not the pedestrian bridge. It is absolutely hands down, by my experience, Pleasant Street.
Yeah.
It is undersized. You've got the sewer main that flows through it. You get all types of debris hung up in there. And it's just too small, which is reducing your velocity upstream. And now your North Main Street crossing can't have the velocity. Kelleher can't have the velocity because of it. So if you're gonna focus on one, that would be number one. I don't know what the downside of like Fisher's Garage looks at. I know the inlet of that culvert seems big enough. But certainly the outlet sounds like it gets to a choke point. So that should probably be priority two.
Well, it's state owned. We don't control it.
The state owns the portion under Sugarloaf Street, which may be perfect. We don't know if they own the portion of the cemetery in Fisher's Garage that may be the
Good
choke
point.
point.
Good point.
So that's why I would have to look into it further. How far is it open? Where does the choke point come into play? How big is it? And what type of effective cost management can we put in there?
Okay.
To also, Nick and Rosalie, when you just, the L's and the S's, does that mean that riparian buffer, it only takes a short time for it to have a benefit? I mean, it will also have a long-term effect.
It would also have a long
Just
term
want to
effect,
understand.
Yeah, it's
We-
more about how long would it take to actually implement the project. So, a culvert's gonna take a while, no matter what, and then,
Floodplain,
yeah,
coloring, same thing.
yeah,
Have to be studied.
permitting.
Right, and part of the reason that those infrastructure upgrades take long time is because of the money, you gotta get the money, right? Whereas it wouldn't cost that much to do a buffer planting. So it can happen quickly.
I did have a similar question to Tim. It's like, if you took that chart with the short term, long term, what would the priorities be for the long term effect? you know, is some of the short-term stuff that we could do pretty quickly with low dollars gonna have a long-term effect that, would have a, you know, an immediate plus a long-term effect. So just trying to qualify, I know it's gonna take a long time for a culvert, it's gonna take a long time to do the railroad bridge, it's gonna take forever. But some of these other ones, what's the benefits from it, that we can get out of it? Should we do short terms first and some of the long terms, or divide them? And just a comment other than that question is, I really, in my experience in living in town only for 40 years, I'm a newcomer. But that upper part of Bloody Brook from the upper railroad culvert and that whole all the way down to Jackson Road, the agricultural lands have encroached so closely that the riparian area is, for a lot of it, is pretty much gone. What could we do, and what would be the benefit in that whole big upper part of Bloody Brook for flood storage to, you know, to work with the farmers and the agricultural and the property owners in the area to introduce wetlands, to reintroduce riparian areas, because that was, as you said, if you look at the history of Deerfield, a total swamp back in the day, and that's what it was meant to be. So that was kind of a comment, but the other one was on Tim's things, like if you do short term, should we do that first and get a long term gain, or some of the how will we prioritize this as we look at it?
Right, yeah, that's a good question. I think so, yes, I think there's a lot of opportunity up in that upper part of the Bloody Brook watershed. Part of the challenge for us is, you know, when we're identifying projects is, you know, you don't want to, you know, shine a light on somebody's land and say, hey, you should do this with your property, right? But, so I'll try to kind of take a measured approach to that. So this is, I did want to show you one other potential project that we inadvertently skipped over. This is one that is currently it's a house. It looks to be possibly vacant. It's at 13 Sugarloaf Street. According to the town assessor's maps, it is owned by an out-of-state resident who may have inherited this through a trust or something.
Yeah, she bought it for her brother to live in. Yes, yeah, she was recently there, cleared out the whole backyard.
Okay.
Yeah, which Pete and I put them in timeout because they were getting too close to the brook.
So I just, you know, the you know, mindset of being opportunistic, right? Seeing a property like this with a lot of frontage, you know, 460 feet of frontage on Sugarloaf Brook. There's an opportunity in the backyard of this property, you know, for wetlands, floodplain storage. Also, you know, if, you know, it could potentially give you some flexibility as you look ahead towards replacing Sugarloaf Street crossing. Because right now, the brook does this big turn, right? It goes under Fisher's Garage by the cemetery and comes back. But if you know, you could envision some scenario where instead of fixing what's there, putting in a new crossing might be the way to go, right? And this seems like a parcel that's worth, you know, considering as, you know, an opportunity to play some role for mitigation. I guess that's all I want to say about it.
So can I just, we need to give you have two things that you're yet to deliver, and you need us to give you guidance about what you should focus on.
I also want to say that in that consideration, if there's something that you think might be of benefit to the town for future outreach. So for example, if we developed a concept plan for something that you could then use for more outreach to get more support for that type of project, even if it doesn't end up being that project. That's just another way of thinking about it as well.
Well, we're hoping to get funding for the PL 566, which is a flood prevention program that allows the state, the railroad, the town, private landowners to participate. However, in the current budget that ends this September, it went from 900 million to 43 or 42 million. So we're hoping to get that funded again. We have support. We've started this process. We have support from the Northeast conservation districts, but we also have from our own state engineer and our own state conservationist who is checking off the boxes. That's why it's important, Julie, to please sign in and the sign-up sheet, to prove that we're having public meetings and public discussion, and that we are identifying problems. And part of the checkoff is to identify problems and that there are stakeholders and that identified stakeholders, and that we do want to participate. I know Bloody Brook Farm is participating and willing to participate. I'm pretty sure Galinsky's have signed up for like cover crops and stuff in the past, and that we could work with them on our riparian buffer potentially through regular programs that are already funded, like the CSP and the equip programs. So we can do some agricultural stuff already, and we've been very lucky that the MVP money has been funding what normally in phase one would be 100% paid for by NRCS, and the start of phase two, which is the engineering, hopefully again would be 100% paid for. And so we haven't gotten to that part. So what we're trying to do is bridge till we get money from NRCS or able to get money from NRCS. So what do you think would be the most productive that you could do and that would potentially be funded either under current NRCS programs that are funded or under MVP programs? Because the whole point is to have this be paid for and not be on the burden of the taxpayers. This is normally a 3 to 5 year process. Because of the current situation on the federal level, it'd probably be more like 6 years. But, you know, we're moving along, we're checking off the boxes. What would you suggest would be the most productive?
I think MVP definitely prefers nature-based projects. I'm wondering if we could pair some of these where if we do a culvert replacement design that we're also tying in some sort of wetland restoration. And then even some of these more like public education on yard waste, you know, that's an outreach thing that MVP likes to see as well. But for the concept design leading to that, I mean, we could choose some of those projects that could then tie in.
I just had a question. Is there a deadline for our MVP applications and what is that deadline?
It's March 20 for the application fee.
Yeah, the Conservation District has just put in an innovative grant for about $50,000 to do plantings along Bloody Brook on town-owned property. We've also put in a biodiversity, which I'm pretty sure we'll get. And that money will be available hopefully in 6 weeks. We have a biodiversity grant in which I don't really know what the competition is. And that's like 100 and something thousand. And again, that's to do plantings and work with the elementary school and do more riparian buffers. So if we use that to leverage more MVP money, what do you think Pleasant Street and I really do think that Kelleher Drive from a mosquito point of view is that Sugarloaf Brook, that taking water away from Sugarloaf coming into Bloody Brook is kind of critical. Somehow, if we do those projects, in my mind, have a little bit higher priority, because when we have flooding, and John, back me up on this if I'm correct. If when we have flooding, that water coming off the mountain from Sugarloaf into Bloody Brook is where we get more flooding. It exasperates the situation. Is that correct?
In the yards, yes.
Yes.
But you go down to your first choke point, and your choke point is holding the water back from there, which doesn't allow for the stream to flow.
So
That's
we're
your
really
Pleasant
talking about Pleasant Street. Okay, so if we could
The
roll,
best thing you guys could ever do, all joking aside, and first of all, this is amazing. Rosalie and Nick did a phenomenal job. The best thing you could ever do as members of this committee is to take your worst rain event in the next 365 days, drive around. Put your eyes on the culverts, take pictures of yourself and go, bingo, there's my two. Because any slide presentation can show you a ton. This is amazing data, but when you actually drive around during a true flooding event and you put your eyes on it, and you're like, there's my problem child right there.
Can I make a suggestion?
sure,
We should schedule the meeting for like 2 weeks from now or something.
well, we have one February 12th.
Okay, so we're good. That's almost 2 weeks, yeah. Where we come back to give them direction on what we should do, because we can talk about this
I know, okay,
nonstop.
all right.
I was going to suggest if there's a concern about Kelleher Drive, perhaps that could be, so I think sounds like Pleasant Street is
Yes.
a good recommendation as one of the concept designs, and then maybe with Kelleher Drive, pairing that with the area that's actually downstream of the culvert, which is what Nick had suggested as floodplain lowering on town property.
Yeah, how do people feel about that? I mean, this is it, like, we show you a spot and say, hey, we could do this amazing thing on your town-owned property. But if there's not buy-in for that, if there's no.
Is that the one that's next to,
Railroad Street,
okay, so,
Rosalie's gonna get to it if she can, but
that's the 6 acre parcel. As
Yeah,
opposed
it's-
to the 8.5 acre parcel that's next to Pelican.
correct, it's 2 parcels, about 6 acres between them, off of Sugarloaf Brook. Off that dead end, not Rayburn.
So isn't it right down?
Yeah, it's just at the bottom side here, the bottom left in those slides, just south of Glenski's, fields.
I think it would be very interesting. I mean, that was and has been and will be hopefully senior housing at some point in the future. But to come up with a conceptual plan that would restore wetlands, but that would also be able to have senior housing. You know, dual, just like the park parcel that we talked about next to Pelican. That's wet already, so if you had a concept design of how you can capture water and have a dual purpose with recreation. That's kind of. Yeah, but anyway. I think we'll have another meeting, we have to think about it, if we go and, read through this some more and think about it, we can come up with some more. We can come up with a consensus. I think there's definitely interest in Pleasant Street, for sure. And,
Thank you.
yeah. I think the other thing that would be very helpful is, the first presentation, Greg, it's on the town website, right?
Yeah.
Okay, if people can look at the first presentation, there's lots and lots of information there. And this is on top of that initial information. So if people could think about this would be very helpful. And give us feedback, Julie, John, Sharon, Pam. You know, it'd be really nice to hear what you think. You know, we'd really appreciate the thoughtfulness.
But in senior housing, the seniors will do all the planting for you. That's what they call a win-win.
Yes, I agree.
I'll second that vote. Then do it,
I think also we can look at,
and they have more help.
we can take another look at that. Now that we have more perspective from what we've heard tonight, we can take another look ourselves and, you know, kind of see what we think would be a good option.
Jason,
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on a few comments there. One of the things is that you know, if you're a move, first thing you wanna do is stop on feet, okay? And this is why people going back to zoning and building up the property. And I've only been here 11 years, but I've been in the area and I've watched this whole place for the last 35, 40 years. It's a beautiful little town. But the town itself is the largest. They're the most guilty of building up on Brook since about 1990. And it continually goes on and on. The houses for the most part haven't changed. But when we talk about the development, we talk about, and I have nothing against the schools or anything, but you know, the elementary school that was built up over there, and the Frontier, which is, you know, I'm guessing it's been triple the size. You're talking about now the library and this, and now you're talking about trying to house and the same thing. You have to stop the bleeding before you start investing in money to try to fix something that's already gonna fall.
Frontier is not tripled in size, Frontier is the same size as the original.
Again, I don't know.
The elementary school is new, that was a town-owned park.
Yeah.
Yep, that was all field.
So that's all I want to do.
oh, Denise has another meeting to go, but that's the point of putting in parking lots with holding tanks, things like that. For residents.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Nick and Rosalie, thank you so